Okay, so welcome to this talk with Chris Lawson, Artistic Director of the Oldham Coliseum Theatre for Excel 2021. So welcome, Chris. Thank you. And Chris is going to talk to us today about the audition process, the rehearsal room, the director's role within a building, guiding the theatre through a global pandemic, which sounds like it could be a whole talk in itself, and also programming and producing from the future direction of Oldham Coliseum. So we're very privileged to have him with us. So as I've just said, if you would like to ask him any questions, please pop them in the chat, and Chris will come to them at the end. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Chris. Welcome.
Hi, Trey. Thank you so much. Thanks, Trey. Thanks, Melissa, as well. And thanks for coming, everyone. It's a real privilege, and it's my privilege because in the job I do, although an artist, I spend more and more time in meetings talking about everything but art, it seems. So to chat to a Zoom room full of artists is quite a relief, especially on a Friday afternoon. I was in a meeting this morning for 2 hours and I understood very little of what was happening with people who weren't artists. So it's quite a relief to be able to chat about the work and theatre and culture as well. Yeah, if you put any questions in the chat, I will kind of back and forth with you about them. I'm not ignoring you, it just lets my brain sort of process what you're asking and help keep me on track. I'm glad Trey went over what I said I'd talk about. It seems like I've said I'd talk about everything in an hour, so it's probably not possible, but I will be open and I'll be honest, as honest and open as I can be. I don't know everything, no one does, so I can only kind of talk about my experiences and how I approach things. I'm not saying it's all right, but it generally does come from the right place. And I will just say to the others as well that I'm playing Danger Zoom because my very small baby is in the next room having his nap. So we're going to try and get through the whole hour without the baby monitor going. So if you just see me pop off screen, I'm just having a quick look and see all is well. And that's just the nature of running a theatre from your loft while having a baby at the other side of the room. So I guess I think I will open just briefly with giving some context about who I am. Maybe I think I've certainly met some, if not all of you before or chatted to you. So I won't go on too long about it, but I've been at the Coliseum for 6 years, and the first 4 years of that were as associate director, where the job was kind of one of the favourite jobs I've ever done because it was 95% the art and making work and directing shows and engaging with artists. And then for the last 2 years, I've been artistic director and I hope you've noticed. If you've not, then I've clearly got more to do. Undergone a process of kind of tried to change the work that you see on the Coliseum stage and the way that we support artists and engage with people in Oldham and Greater Manchester and across the country. And I think there has been a big shift from my opinion, but I also think that journey isn't complete, and myself and the team who are in place at the moment are trying to learn and talk more, which is partly why I'm here today. I am originally from Rotherham, which is a town just outside Sheffield. It's not dissimilar in size to Oldham, perhaps a little smaller, and its distance to Sheffield is quite similar to what Oldham is to Manchester. So Oldham's a town that I feel comfortable and familiar. I'm proudly from a working class background in Rotherham. My family worked in the steelworks, which is Sheffield's, or was and still is, I guess, Sheffield's main industry. I went to a comprehensive school, a secondary school, and drama kind of was the thing that got me through, really, when I wasn't always doing as well as I could be in other areas. It was drama and sport that kind of kept me grounded and kept me focused, and spent a long time trying to get out, really, maybe not quite feeling that I fitted in where I was. I sort of knew what I was interested in and wanted to go and explore and do that. And you'll have heard this story probably 1,000 times, so I won't go into massive detail. I know some of you might have heard from Sarah Punchin yesterday. Sarah's doing a show at the Coliseum, Jungle Book, coming up at Easter, and I know we have similar kind of pathways. I went to drama school, went to Bretton Hall, which is part of Leeds Uni, and it was in the middle of a Yorkshire sculpture park, so it was a really beautiful place to train. I had the shock of my life. There was so much green and sheep and streams and just beautiful place. But I, in my head, thought I was going to university in the middle of Leeds. So once I got over that culture shock, spent 3 years training as an actor and loved it. Always struggled with lines and my memory, certainly short-term memory, and that would cause me quite an anxiety. And also in making work as an actor, very much had an interest and focus on the kind of bigger picture, but also what the effect of the work was. So not necessarily the character's journey, but more the purpose of the piece. And even now, as an artistic director, my key moments of a night of theatre are in the bar, and not for the reasons you might think, but to hear the conversations and hear who is chatting about what they've seen and what impact it might have had. And so a lot of my acting and directing was around theatre and education. And I think in a lot of ways, it's because you could see quite often an immediate effect. And that's a great feeling, because you kind of go in, oh, wow, we're seeing this young person who wasn't engaging 30 minutes ago, just transform in front of our eyes. And sometimes maybe not in front of your eyes, but it's impacting people further down the line. And so education and directing always sat kind of hand in hand for me. And I eventually went on to train as a drama teacher, as did my partner. And it was this awareness, and perhaps coming from the background that I've come from, that I always sort of needed to know where the next paycheck was coming from, and that I could support myself, and later down the line now that I could support my family. So freelancing life was never really something that I took to. It just caused massive anxiety, and I think that's kind of from my upbringing of just needing to know that I'll be okay and that I can provide for others. And teaching and working in schools really helped me do that. I kind of felt like I was doing loads of great things at once, and also feeling secure in it. But there was something inside me that was kind of going, I don't feel like I've had a go myself at what I'm talking to other people about doing. And I feel like I'd done enough. I never felt like a fraud. I just didn't ever see myself much more than the drama teacher role. It was all about the drama. So once I was dropped into a kind of form teacher setting, or when I was made assistant head of sixth form, things like that, that's when I started to realise, oh no, it's still the theatre for me. So I went to do my masters at RADA, and that was a big shift, because it was somewhere I was maybe led to believe when I was younger, or maybe it was my own doing, maybe somewhere that I felt I didn't belong and shouldn't be going. And I was working as a teacher while still at RADA. And I think the first thing I learned was that everything I thought about the place, perhaps that made me feel like I might not belong, wasn't true. And that I'd earned the right to be there, and I was working hard. And the experience there was going to be what I made it. And I think it helped going a little bit later in life. I think I was 25, 26. So I was a good few years out of drama school and had been teaching. So I was maybe more comfortable in who I was. And I was teaching 4 days a week at the same time to pay for the course, because that's the only way I could do it. But like with a lot of the work I was making, it was kind of on the side. It was whilst I was doing other things. And at the stage you're at is possibly the most exciting stage. And I'd encourage you to, you might not always feel like it, but I'd encourage you to write down in this moment in your life why you're doing what you're doing and why you want to do it, because it's probably its most purest. And for me, I'd write it down, put it in an envelope, put it away, and think about it as a long journey. People often think about it as quick wins, whether they see it as fame or if they haven't made it by a certain age, 22, 23, 24, whatever, that they're kind of failing. And I think I'm realizing now, when I'm in a job in a building and have a young family, that actually for a true artist, the journey is for the duration of your life. And what you will do alongside your art is and should be a variation of other things, from pulling pints to jobs that you like, working with people you don't. All of those experiences, they all form part of who you are, and they're all enriching experiences. And when you've wrote this letter, or when you've just kind of even bullet pointed why you're doing what you're doing, and you're 30, 40, 50, keep it and just look at it whenever you kind of questioning why you're doing what you're doing. And I still get mine out and read it now. During a pandemic, certainly, I think everyone's had a wobble in the arts of why and how. Sidetracking a little bit there, I'm going to pull it back. So, and then I used the education to work at a theatre called the Armida, and kind of ran their learning department. And again, the teaching and the working with young people and the facilitation was always forming part of my directing. And I'm saying this quite hurriedly, but alongside all of this, I was making work. And some of it was rubbish. And I didn't realize at the time it was rubbish. I thought it was amazing. And it's only on reflection I kind of go. But it doesn't matter if it was or not, because I was discovering myself as an artist. I was meeting collaborators, some of which I've worked with all the way through my career, some of which we've gone on different paths and come back together. Someone I went to RADA with is Canadian and based in Toronto. And last night and over the last month, we've been working on a Zoom show together. It's an American playwright, 2 Canadian actors, a Canadian director, myself and Jamie as British producers, and 2 British actors. That's a relationship that came from 10 years ago. And we've maybe spoken 3 times in that 10 years. And then suddenly that moment came where we should and did reconnect. And London, being in RADA, being at the Armida, London was cool. It was amazing. And it was tough. And I'm glad I did it, and I'm glad I left. Because I was fortunate enough, and maybe it was my work ethic, I'm not sure, to be continuously working. And maybe it's because I'm from Rotherham, Sheffield, I just had this wider awareness of the country, which is such a small place. And there were friends in London that were quite possibly much more talented than I am, who were maybe not working as much as they should. And because their understanding or awareness of work stopped outside of London. And I never understood that, because Manchester, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Leeds, Sheffield, Liverpool, they all have amazing scenes. And I think Oldham is very unique in that sense. And Oldham is a very special place. And I think for me, the Coliseum is part of that, because who the size of a town of Oldham has a theatre that makes and tours work, and you can and should be able to get through the doors of. And I don't mean now because you're learning and you're training, but whether it be in a year or in 10 years, you should be able to get through the doors of. That's quite unique, because the people we work with and we make shows with are based in Liverpool, Glasgow, Toronto. They're major cities. So Oldham, for me, is absolutely punching above its weight in some ways, and that must be protected. And I think you guys and artists in Oldham have a responsibility to support that. And I think you can only support that if we fulfill our responsibility to enable you to support it. So the job came up and I moved up without any hesitance, really. And I think it's a really exciting time. And you may have worried at times over the pandemic of what arts looks like going forward, but I think you've got this unique opportunity to shape it to what it can become. I think I entered the industry at this very small window where the way things were not okay anymore and were perhaps changing in how practice was, and this new way that wasn't quite fully formed. So I've got an understanding of how theatres used to run, but I'm trying to run one in a different way. And I think as an artist, it's understanding and infiltrating the system to be able to change the system. I think you have to understand what you're trying to be part of to make a difference. And I look at actors and writers who are 70, 80, and they're still doing it. And they might not be famous in the traditional sense. I look at that and go, I want to be like you, because actually that is a career. And that opportunity to work in different ways in different parts of the country for a sustained period. If that means taking 10 years out between the ages of 35 to 45 while you do traveling, bring up a child, earn money because you need to pay the rent, it doesn't stop you being an artist. I'm going to look in the I've just went then. That was a good 20 minutes. I'm so sorry, everyone. I kind of got on well. I said it'd be a quick journey. We've got about 1,000 other things to talk about. This is not possible, Trey. How are we going to do this? I'm finding the story. So acting for me is an escape. Nice to know we can all share a similar story. I think it is storytelling, isn't it? And I really feel that work is about the audience. But I think where you guys are at, you can afford to be selfish, actually. And if you make work at this stage, I'm going to watch Trey's face while I say that, just in case I'm going against her practice. I think if there's a time to be selfish, it's at an experimental stage. And I think you're in a safe space to try things and fail. And failing is fine. The key thing with failing is learning from it. I'm in an odd place now where I'm very lucky in some ways. Yeah, I've got to make work that tries to counter 1,000 different questions of why it's being made and who it's being made for. So the last thing I actually think about when I'm making work, perhaps sadly, is why do I want to make it? Because I'm the last person who kind of counts, really. It's about the audiences. And in telling those stories, I think it's quite rare that you can tell a story that resonates with everyone. I think people, places, experiences are far too different. And I think if you try and tell a story that talks to everyone, you run the risk of telling a story that speaks to no one. But for me, the first question when approaching any piece of work is, who is this for? And why should they give their time and further down the line, money to hear this? And I approach it with two ways, form and content. If the content is familiar, then be brave to change the way the story is told. If the way you're telling the story is familiar, then make the content challenging. But I think one of the two should always challenge and one should be familiar. And that way you're not alienating everyone, but also you're not just achieving nothing from it. I'm going to head back to the chat. Do you think London is worth exploring in order to progress in the arts? Who's that from? Madison. Oh, that's a tricky one. I mean, hi, Madison. I don't think everyone necessarily has to go and live and work in London, I guess, would be my thing. I think if there's a reason and a purpose to go there, then absolutely. You know, I was there for my teacher training and then stayed there for work and my masters and then left again. So I think if you are going to London or another major city, just maybe know why you're going. And again, this is where Oldham is in this unique position in the country because it's so close to Manchester, which therefore means you're so close to London. And we audition in Oldham and we audition in London. And I do that trip in a day. And I'm there at 8 a.m. I see actors all day and I'm home at 8 p.m. And again, there's other things that are involved, like money and transport and things like that. But I think at the moment, London is probably not what it was in terms of a need to be there. There is more work in the 7 cities that are within an hour's travel from Oldham, I would suggest probably, than there is in London. There's a whole regions of mid-scale, large and small-scale producing theatres. So as much as London has its value, have an awareness of these other places, because to be clever about it, Madison, while everyone else is looking at London and you're looking at Hull, Sheffield, Dundee, then I think you might be onto a win there because the country is so much bigger. Do you think that in order to progress in this industry, you have to be talented in more than one artistic area? So, for example, acting and dancing. It's from Josh. I think if you are talented in more than one area, good on you. I don't think I am, Josh. I think I'm a bit of a one-trick pony, if I'm honest. Maybe not. Maybe the facilitation and the education is that other area. I don't know. I think it's things are opening up a lot more to mean that people are considered more broadly as artists. I'm not sure listing 10 things next to your name in your Twitter bio is going to do you any massive favors, because I think it's a careful balance of knowing who you are and what you can do and trying to master those crafts. Whereas if you become a jack of all trades, then you could run into problems in a different way where you're never really pushing forward in any of them. So you know what your skills are, you know what your abilities are. I think the key for me with it would be not comparing yourself to other people with it. So in that case, Josh, with acting and dancing, if they are the areas that you are interested in and skilled, amazing, focus on those. I think it probably naturally comes out in the wash over the years. I think you kind of find your path and that path might change sometimes. What are the sites and places you use to look for employees? This is a bit of a boring answer from me. Spotlight. In terms of actors, Spotlight. I think when you get to a stage within a building, and I always want to talk to people about this. They don't always want to hear it, but you don't always see it from the outside. You are in a building. Everything you do has risk attached to it. And people don't always see that risk, and they maybe just see you as employing the same people or doing things in the same way, but you're tied into so many ways of working. So brilliant ways like equity that make sure things are done fairly, and UK theatre. But I think there are so many people. If I put a call on Spotlight for an actor in their 20s of either gender, there's going to be 1,500 submissions, and that's for one role, and people don't see that side. So you kind of you sometimes get burnt, and that makes you trust in the tried and tested ways like Spotlight. For other roles, now I think it is open. So there's something called Open Hire, and you should check it out. Open Hire, I think it's .co.uk, and arts organisations now, for writers, directors, designers, all sorts of roles, are putting jobs on open hire for the first time, which just means everyone can see it. And the best thing about it is everything is up front. There's nothing hidden. It says, this is the deal, these are the dates, this is the money. And it's all just up front. So things like open hire are now kind of opening the doors for people. Theatre Clwyd, I think it was, in North Wales, advertised for a director through it. And that's unheard of. You know, normally directors coming into buildings know the artistic director. So things like open hire, weirdly, social media is as bad as it can be at times. Choosing carefully who you follow, and things like arts jobs, which are free to post on. So there's a lot of work at different levels of career on there as well, is really useful. Come back to the. And I said I'd talk about, I'm not sure how many of you are actors specifically. Do most people consider themselves actors, or is it a variation? Okay, depends. I think in a building situation, it's changing as well, because, and you kind of see it in the news really recently and over the last few years, how artists and creatives are treated, and it's much more open now. And actually, you should be really empowered as an artist, because you have a skill set that people want. It's always going to be tough, because there's always going to be more artists than there are jobs, and that's the nature of an industry that is built on passion and love. There's always going to be more people wanting to do it than can do it at that one moment. But for us, for example, we audition in a way where we give audition slots to local artists. Over the last 2 years, we've held open auditions and seen 100 people over 2 days. And we've invited directors from other theatres, whether it be Bolton or wherever, to come and join us. And when you arrive at the Coliseum for the audition, you get a slot and you get a slip of paper, and it tells you who's in the room, what's expected of you, and how it's going to go. Because the last thing we want is for you to be nervous, or for you to feel judged, or for you to feel like you don't know what's going on. Because we want you to get the job. And I think artists forget that. And that's where the power is really held, because we want you to do your best. And I think anyone on the other side of the table who is making people feel that isn't the case need to be questioning what their role is in a job like mine. Artistic directors used to just direct all the shows. For me, my job is facilitating you and others to direct, write, and be in shows. And it's got to be democratic. Otherwise, how boring is a year's worth of work that is just for my brain? I can tell you, it's like super boring and probably a bit weird, and I'll probably lose my job. So the job of the artistic director has got to be to open up. And I think a measure of my role through auditions and other things is actually to see in a few years down the line, you guys on our stages receiving money, essentially, to make work. And if we've done that, then I'd hope we've succeeded. And Dare to Know's an example of that. They're an Oldham-based company, and they just released their micro commission today. And that started from a relationship maybe a year ago. What was your biggest challenge during the pandemic? Oh, Trey, how long have you got? Sanity? Mental health, probably. Remaining human. Prioritising things that are not theatre at times, and remembering that other things exist. Things are tough, and I think people see buildings, but they don't always see the people running them. And there's been 6 of us. There are about 30 full-time staff at the Coliseum, and there's been 6 of us that have worked all the way through, that haven't been furloughed. I've maybe had two days holiday over the last 14 months, and so I think looking after myself whilst trying to look after everyone that works for the organisation has been the challenge. And that's looking after the people that are still working alongside you, but also looking after the other 24 people who maybe are feeling a bit detached and disconnected from the thing they love, and they may be worrying about when you're coming back. And the biggest challenge away from that, but in terms of the work, was understanding and encouraging people to work differently. There's this test you can do, and it kind of breaks down how you approach making theatre. And I'm quite impulsive, and if there's a strong idea and I believe in it, then I'll run with it. And I think this year the challenge has been to take a building that has worked in a similar way for decades and go, that was great, we're not going to do that anymore, and these are the reasons why. From not having a panto on, but doing shows that are recorded and streamed, from having a whodunit that's filmed around the whole of the building with a company that we've never worked with before. So I think the challenge in terms of the work was getting people on board. And coming through that now, I don't think the team at the Coliseum can imagine reverting to how things were. And suddenly you've got the production team going, Chris, you said we might do something outdoor in the summer. Can we do something outdoor in the summer? And we going, yeah, I forgot to said it, but we should probably do it. Let's all do it. And it's not just me. So I think personally and professionally, they've been the biggest challenges. And sometimes just getting up, and going, can we do this again when we don't know what's happening? I think getting so close to opening and not, it just felt like repeatedly being hit sometimes, because you're giving all your energy into something, and then 2 hours later you watch the news and go, oh, that can't happen. We've spent 3 months working on that. What companies do you look at for inspiration? I, at the moment, look beyond the UK for inspiration. I think the UK can sometimes be a little insular and look to each other. So places might look to London, and then those cities might do what London did 6 months before, or might look to Scotland or whatever. And it's this kind of roundabout. So not necessarily companies, but kind of types and styles of working. I look to the Scandinavian countries. I've got an obsession with Denmark and Sweden and Norway, and their kind of seemingly more democratic ways to making work. There are companies there where the artistic director will be artistic director for 5 years, and then they'll step back into the company, and someone else within the company will step into that role, and then they'll open up the company to welcome new members. I think that's a really interesting way of doing things. So it's not the same person at the top for 20 years. Maybe because of what I've just been doing, I'm looking at as well at Canada and the companies over there. And I think it helps keep the Coliseum at the front of things, because we're maybe looking at ways of doing things where other countries are maybe leading the way. Within the UK, like, I've just had my eyes kind of reopened, really, and artists and companies in Oldham and in Greater Manchester who are just like taking chances, like Dare to Know, actually, and the micro commissions that we've been doing. These artists, I feel bad that 2 years ago I didn't know they were there, and a bit embarrassed by that. And so I think I'm working harder now to discover all these new companies. I'm about to finish my teacher training. Any advice? Oh gosh, don't do it. I'm joking. I don't mean that. What's it in? What's the teacher training in, Lois?
So I'm doing it in performance. I'm working with Trey. I'm doing it with the second years. So.
I think it's keeping the love. This is quite a floaty answer. Before I even say it, I'm so sorry. I think it's keeping connected with your love for the subject, because the best teachers for me and drama teachers and myself, and that is the most inspirational thing. And there's other stuff that comes with finishing teacher training that's a lot more bureaucratic, paperwork, and that stuff is important and needs doing. But I think if you put your subjects first, and I think this maybe sometimes frustrates me, not in such with teachers, but artists who are quite quick to complain. But then when you ask about what they've done to keep bettering themselves, there's nothing coming back. So it's reading and it's watching and it's engaging and it's learning. Learning doesn't stop when you finish college or uni. It's got to be a lifelong thing. I'm kind of rediscovering the value of the basis of community theatre in comparison to Greek theatre. If I said that to my friends in the pub, I'd probably be asked to go home. But I know for my job and my love of what I do, it's that continuous learning. So I think whilst you are inspiring others, you have to keep growing yourself. I did warn you, Lois, that would be a fluffy answer.
Thank you.
Would Oldham Coliseum be releasing more shows like Who Done It at the Coliseum going forward, even when everything opens? Yeah, that's the plan. I think this year we've learnt loads, and I think it'd be such a shame if we didn't do that. So the summer season and the autumn and winter season and beyond, for me now, the Coliseum has to be on the stage, around the building, outdoors and online. And that way we open ourselves up to working with more people and supporting more people and having far more interesting work. We can make one show ourselves that can run for 4 weeks, or we can support 5 other people to make shows available in different formats. And when it comes down to that, it's kind of a no-brainer. So I think now we've done it and now we know how to do it. Yeah, totally. You can hold me to that, he says, in a year where you got Chris, you never did any digital work again. But like Oldham's changing and the arts is changing, and we've got to change as well. And if we don't, then you have to question what we're doing. So yeah, I think that's part of the change. Trey, it's quite full on talking for an hour. I never realised. I don't think I've even took a breath. So what else did I say I'd talk about? I'd love to hear from you guys, or if I may, I know I'm going off what this is supposed to be. You might not have an answer to this. How do you feel as an artist in Oldham? Do you feel that this is a kind of hopeful and changing time, or do you feel not so positive? How do you kind of see, not necessarily the Coliseum specifically, but it could be. Ronan, where are you at?
I suppose I'd agree that it is to some extent quite a positive and progressive time. Like me personally, I feel like I've only kind of really stepped into the arts within the last few years personally, because I'm not from like a theatre background or anything. But obviously going to Oldham, which isn't that far away from where I live, I'm surprised that I'd never realised the plethora of, like arts. It literally is like, from an outside perspective, Oldham, where I live, is given a really bad name, but being actually in Oldham, it's a completely different story, in my opinion. Yeah,
it's weird how a few things around the place can kind of taint it, and the reality is so different, and it's a town like a lot of other places that has its challenges. And I think for me, that is why, as a town and a borough, it should be putting the arts to the kind of front of the queue, because of what it can do. And in political ways, that's not always easy to press ahead with, and the cuts to education that have just kind of potentially been announced as happening and things like that. But yeah, I think you're right, and not having that arts background is shouldn't be seen as a disadvantage anymore. I think It's about going, I don't, what can I do about that? There's like, it's not my fault, you know. I mean, my parents, I'm not sure they fully really understand what I do now, even. My dad spent another 5 years telling people I was a teacher after I'd left teaching because he didn't get it. And he came to see shows and went, oh, I get it now. I think that's all right. And I think it's engaging your brain in art that you might not feel is supposed to be for you, because it is. And it's often not the art that makes you feel it's not for you. It's the other people there. But forget them. That doesn't matter. They don't own the art. So I've been to different art forms like contemporary dance and opera, and weirdly fell in love with them. Not that I would necessarily myself ever make them, but kind of once you ignore the stuff that's put on you, or the way people are at these places, you go, no, it's great, and it's informed what you make. The more you read, the more you see, the more you do, the more you engage. It can only make your art better, and that's back to that thing of being weirdly selfish, to take from everywhere and use it to tell those stories.
Chris, I'm aware that when the students work with us, particularly on productions, that it's quite a different process from the professional process. Like we have a much longer rehearsal process. We're still teaching them, so we're giving them lots more teaching rather than direction per se. And I wondered if you could give them an insight into what it might feel like to be on a production with you, where you're directing, like the time scale and what's expected of the actors.
It's chaos, Trey. It's I have no idea what I'm doing. It's I sometimes struggle with this question, because some directors, certainly those with an English language or English literature background, might have a more formalized way of approaching a play. I think for me, as with you as performers or writers, depending what you're in or what you're writing, you will use the tools that you need for that job. So the way that I directed 4 minutes 12 seconds, that rehearsal room and that rehearsal process was very different to how I might approach, say, panto. And I think this is rooted in my educational background and teaching background. It's a collaborative process. So in the audition, I will chat to someone for 10 minutes before I even ask them to read or do their monologue. So I want to know who they are. I want to know about them, and I want to know what they're going to contribute. Because I think if you have this set vision of a show, then that's kind of disrespectful to actors and what they can bring. So for me, I have a loose pencil line of the kind of things that I'd like the show to achieve in terms of its effect. But then I look for creatives, actors, designers, and if it's a new play, the writer, that are going to shape it with me in the room. So it's a very conversation-based process, and it's very much a process of getting up and trying. And some directors, again, not criticizing it, it's just that I don't do it. Some directors might spend the first 3 days sat around tables with iPads, paper, pen, kind of going through the text line by line. I can't do that. That feels a bit static. So it's probably a lot closer to the process you guys undertake than you might think, in that it is collaborative. And so the director, my role in the room, is kind of leading that and shaping that, but it's leading it from the back as opposed to the front and dragging everyone with me. Because then I think when this piece is on stage and it's in front of an audience, the goal for me is for the actors to feel that they have an ownership of this, and that they're buying into the reasons that this work is happening, and how and why they're saying these lines, because they've contributed to it, as opposed to that kind of I've learned it and now I'm saying it approach. So yeah, it's fairly open, and then as the director, you can kind of loosen and tighten the strings as you need to keep things on track. And I think the difference around length of rehearsal is that in the kind of professional rehearsal room, the actor is coming prepared with a lot more tools that are needed for that, which enables you to kind of cut the fat off the room and know what you don't need to go into because everyone kind of knows it. So you can maybe just touch on it as opposed to go through it. But saying that, again, in quite a boring but honest way, it's often financially driven, Trey. I mean, at the Armida, the rehearsal period was 6 weeks. At the Coliseum, it's 4. And at the National, I'm guessing, but it might be 8 or 10 sometimes. And in Europe, in a lot of the German theatre companies, they rehearse for months. So sometimes it's not actually about being more advanced or anything like that. It's going, how long can we afford these actors in this rehearsal room? Because if I could have 6 weeks, I'd totally take it. We'd probably play things like Splat a bit more, but it's always good for grounding everyone and just making sure everyone's starting from that same point. Does anyone have any more? Craig, we can chat now. You can take your things off if you want. Is there anything else from that? Is there any other thoughts on kind of where you're at in your career and what are your kind of maybe worries or concerns going forward? Ryan?
I'm going on tonight my PGCE, finger during the summer, but I still feel a bit lost with obviously my creative output. I go Oldham Coliseum a lot and stuff like that, but I'm from Rochdale, so there's not a lot of places around Rochdale who do it. Like we've got the Gracie Fields Theatre and we've got the Bacup Theatre, but I don't think we do anything to the extent of Oldham Coliseum. But as a writer, do you have any advice on how I'm able to get my work seen? I think I've emailed you and touched on it a little bit in the past.
Did I reply, Ryan? This could be awkward.
No, you have replied. You asked for information.
Amazing. Good. Just checking.
No, yeah, you did.
Firstly, I think being lost is all right, and you'll always have a sense of that. I do now. Imposter syndrome can creep in at any stage. And being lost, you don't need all the answers because that's what you're doing, and you're doing the things. You're asking the questions. You're trying to write, or you are writing, and you're doing things like your PGCE. So any sense of feeling lost, you're doing something about it. You're being active as opposed to passive. I think one of the bigger questions is why do you want your writing to be seen? And it's not that you shouldn't, but what is the kind of outcome of that? What is the immediate goal with that? I think sometimes people want to be seen by jumping straight to what they might consider the top of the tree and be seen by people who they think can immediately affect change. But actually, I think it's your peers and people who maybe work at the Coliseum, tutors like Trey. I think it's those people that you might and should be perhaps seeking guidance from, because that's safe. And that doesn't mean that you're not being brave, but they're the people who are going to kind of help and support your development. So you could send your script to a submission window for a nationally recognised theatre, and they may pick it up. They may also never reply to you, or they may reply and give you criticism that you might not be prepared to take at this moment. So I just think it's that bigger thing of, are you ready by sharing this or having this looked at to receive that kind of criticism that isn't always as constructive as it can be. So I think it's kind of going through the rungs on the ladder and kind of testing the water. And also things locally. You said you're Rochdale based. Greater Manchester Fringe and Manchester ADP. ADP are a great company who do things like, and they're just slowly kind of rebuilding after the pandemic. They take new writing and they give it, I think, 10, 20 or 30-minute slots at the King's Arms in Salford for rehearsed readings, and the audience give you feedback. And actually, so if you want to kind of hear that and you want to put it on that platform, I think things like ADP or 53.2, or we have our script submission window in January and July. I think sending it to places like that in the short term are probably best, because again, it's more likely to be constructive. Does that help, Ryan? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, that does. Thank you.
Amazing. Is there anything else you want me to cover, Trey? I didn't cover everything I said I would. I did tell you that I'd lied about that.
I'm just trying to guess who I've got here and what they might be wanting to ask, but maybe feeling a bit nervous. I guess, Mel, you're normally good at this. Can you think of something that someone would normally ask or want to know?
Probably from the people here, it'll be similar to the questions I was asking in the panel yesterday, but when they've just come out of like their education and they're moving on to try and like get independent in the industry, or like trying out new things, like the steps to do that. Like I know you've mentioned some stuff like getting involved with like the fringe festivals and things like that. I think some of them are a bit hesitant to do it because they don't understand, like the process of it's really hard. But is there anything that could help them extra, like move on to the next step kind of thing?
Yeah, I think collaboration is key throughout a career, and you shouldn't have to do it on your own. And you're in a position, even the people on the screen, where you can collaborate with each other. So I think approaching things like that you want in if you don't know how, or might seem expensive, or anything like that. I think it's coming together, and you look at the groups and the way that people work in theatre and the arts now, quite often they're collectives, and it's not this structure where you have to do it all, or you have this Christmas tree where there's one person sat at the top and 10 people sat at the bottom of it. People can kind of move around and rotate and take different things on. So I think it's about connecting with other people. And I watched some of the panel talk that with Sarah and Davinia and Ben and a couple of others on the panel as well. And I think what you could maybe take from today and yesterday is there's a pattern across what a lot of people were saying, which is not dissimilar to myself, is how hard these people are willing to work, how they put themselves forward, and how quite often, like I said, they're not doing it alone. I remember Sarah saying about how she adapts her CV depending on what she's doing. And these people have such varied experiences. And I think it's so easy for someone in a job like an artistic director or a freelance director or whatever it might be, and to see on the surface then going, that's just what they do. It's kind of easy. But actually, all the people you heard from yesterday and today, that's not the case. So it's building these connections, and it's putting yourself out there, and it's doing non-arts related things, for sanity, but even in working in bars, like you will probably meet more artists there than in 1,000 other places. And so it's not just putting yourself out there with your work, because you've got to be careful not to expect people to just want to see it or to engage. It's about building the foundations for that engagement down the line. So it sounds cliche, but kind of starting small, and like I say, going and watching things. That's how a number of people have kind of landed in jobs, and I have myself. And it sounds like it's just luck, but it's luck that's half self-created by positioning yourself in a way for that luck to fall your way in the first place. And I think that's where it comes back to things like fringe theatres. And I mean, the fringe is not just Manchester Fringe. Fringe theatre is such an undervalued basis for artists. If anything, fringe theatre is the most genuinely artistic place of work ever, because what you see is people being brave and creative and interesting, because they're not kind of shackled by all the other stuff that can come. But anyone you talk to, unless there is kind of ultra privilege there that has laid a path of gold for them to walk into whatever job they're doing, these people have taken the same journeys that you're on. And so it might sometimes feel like you're on this journey on your own, but others have done it as well. felt like I was about to start a manifesto then, Trey, and just like rally us into, let's just get all the Coliseum funding and just, you know, do X, Y, and Z with it. But I believe it. I think I believe it strongly because it's a journey that I've lived as well, and it's my background, and I'm proud of it. And I think sometimes you see people in certain jobs and maybe just wonder if they've just been handed it, and sometimes they have, but not always. And again, I think it's that thing of playing the long game again and going, actually, I could take you could take 2 years out to earn money or to train in something else or to travel. That's all right. It doesn't mean that you won't come back, as long as the desire stays burning for you to come back. That is the danger. Life does sometimes get in the way, and you sometimes have to make other sacrifices to be an artist as well. It can affect relationships. I have lived in 5 or 6 different cities in 15 years, from Edinburgh to London to Leeds to Manchester. Who knows where next? You know, so there is balance in that as well. It's not an easy ride, but if it was, we'd all be doing something different.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Chris, for your time, for being generous with us and sharing your experiences. I think there is some common themes coming from both of those, from your talk and from the industry panel. That's really useful for the students to hear. So thank you. And genuinely, it's really exciting to see what you're doing with Oldham Coliseum. And I hope, you know, you continue to be able to take more risks, and that hope, you know, all of us here remember to, you know, we have to play a part in that as well. We have to come and watch that work and support what you're doing, so that you're able to. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Friday afternoon. Thanks for not just like leaving halfway through. It's done wonders for my confidence, guys. I really appreciate you sticking through for the hour, and it was really nice to chat back and forth as well.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.